Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got what we needed when the sun shone down on the Garden of Eden.
Is audio going?
There we go.
Are we being live streamed? Are we recording?
I believe so. We are.
All right.
Take it away, Sluggo.
Okay, Steve, we're all systems go. Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman, back with the Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition call. This is number 131. We have a very, very packed agenda today, including a discussion of probably the single most important thing that has happened in the 21st century so far. If anybody wants to guess at it, I'm going to come back to it, and you can see if you got it. But I am not kidding. What happened within the past 10 days is, as far as I'm concerned, the game changer for the 21st century. We have, unfortunately, today a mass shooting in Nashville. It is the first one in recent memory that has been done by a woman, according to the news. She had two semi-automatic weapons there and killed at least 3 children, at least 3 teachers to the Christian school in Nashville. Another horrible event. Thank God that we don't have gun control, right? We have Brent Tannehill going to talk to us briefly about the disenfranchisement of trans people. We have an interesting story about the National Hockey League and gay rights, something we wouldn't expect. Then we're going to go into the number one issue this week, which is the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, which is heated up, and in many cases we're hearing a lot of very interesting things about it. We also, I don't know, is Judith Whitmer with us yet? We're going to talk about the disenthronement, I guess, the defenestration. Anybody wants to tell me what defenestration is of the progressive leadership of the Nevada Democratic Party? We're going to get into censorship nationwide, which is really running full speed ahead, and in a very, very bad way, a very dangerous way. And we're also going to talk about the radioactive leak at the Monticello nuclear plant in Minnesota. And I will say, I have been to Monticello in Virginia, Thomas Jefferson's ancestral home, and it is Monticello. That Monticello means small hill, but they're having a radioactive leak there, and it is not cool and something we really need to deal with. So welcome, Dennis Bernstein, the host of the Flashpoint show, nationally syndicated KPFA. Glad to have you with us, Dennis, and thank you for having me on last Friday. Let's start now. In the second hour, we also have a group. Wendy, what is the name of the group that's going to be joining us in the second hour?
Living Earth Movement.
The Living Earth Movement. Right.
I'll drop a link.
They will be talking about their environmental work. So as always, we have a ton. Let's start at the top now. Has anybody want to guess what is the most important thing that has happened so far in the 21st century that happened within the last 10 days and which is going to change everything in world history? Anybody want to guess at that? Tatanka, you might have an idea. Okay, it's the meeting of the prime minister or the leader of China with the leader of Russia in Moscow. This is earth-shaking in every way, shape, or form. You might want to think to yourself, after a century or more of American domination of world politics, in 2023, which is more powerful? The alliance of the United States and Canada, or the alliance of China, Russia, India, Iran, and many countries in Africa? Which is more powerful? The bottom line is that the joint meeting of the leaders of China and Russia, which has not happened in this kind of mode before, and is happening in the middle of the war in Ukraine, which is just fraught with all sorts of complications that we don't need to discuss right now. But the bottom line is that Russia and China, since they had two kindred leaders, which was many, many years ago, which is Stalin and Mao. Stalin and Mao got along very well. But Stalin and, after Stalin died, Mao thought Khrushchev was a clown and had no respect for Russia. And for all these years, China, which has, of course, been growing by leaps and bounds in all ways, shape, and form, is now reaching out to Russia in a way that really ordains that this will not be a second American century. If you put China, India, Russia, Iran, and the other major countries of Eurasia and add them in with Africa, you can tell very, very clearly that the United States is headed for a second-rate power. And the population of China is about 1.5 billion. The population of India actually has exceeded now the population of China. And Russia is not that big in population, but obviously geographically it's gargantuan. The guy to read about this is Alfred McCoy, and I'd like to have him on sometime. Alfred McCoy is a professor of history at the University of Wisconsin, following the great footsteps of William Appleman Williams, who wrote The Contours of American History and The Tragedy of American Diplomacy, and was really one of the great scholars of our time. Alfred McCoy wrote a book in the 1960s that changed everything in terms of our perceptions of the war in Vietnam. It was called The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia. And Alfred McCoy laid out how the drug trade was shaping the Vietnam War. It was an incredibly important book, really opened people's eyes. And he is now writing about what they call the pivot, which is the peace in between Europe, Asia, and Africa, which will define who dominates the world going forward. And while we, the United States, has been fighting imperial war after imperial war, 10 years in Vietnam, 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq, and completely draining our treasury, letting our infrastructure go to pot, as it were, and doing all the things that empires do in their decline. The Chinese have spent a fraction of what we've been spending on the military, and have had what's called a Belt and Road project, where they are basically building the infrastructure that will link Europe and Asia and Africa. And this is why this moment, especially happening in the middle of the war in Ukraine, is so absolutely critical to the future of the world. So I just want to put that out there. It is not generally in our wheelhouse in terms of what we discuss, but it is something of huge importance to all of us going forward for the next 50 or 100 years, because this represents the rise to power of China. The other thing, and the very important thing that people need to understand that they did agree on, is that China and Russia and probably India will join in, which is about half the population of the world. They are going to get off the dollar. The dollar has been the defining currency of world trade for the last 100 years. And literally since the 1890s, 1900s, when the US started to become a dominant power and the dollar was used for global trade, that's going to change. And it's the Chinese yuan, 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 that is now going to dominate. And I will say that those of you who are looking for an explanation for the war in Iraq and for the destruction of Gaddafi in Libya, it was much of it was about currency, because Saddam, who had all the resources he needed, and Gaddafi both wanted to leave the petrodollar. Saddam was talking about trading his oil in euros, and they killed him for it, basically. And then Gaddafi had about 130 tons of gold, just in his basement somewhere, 130 tons of gold. And he was going to launch a new African currency, the dinar. And if there's one thing that gives a country dominance in the world, it's having the dominant currency. And the United States, after this meeting between the Chinese and the Russians, that's over, people. And we're going to have to start really seriously reevaluating. We had an American century, which we squandered in the killing fields of Southeast Asia and Southwest Asia and the Middle East. And this is a tipping point. And it happened last week around the vernal equinox in 2023. So you may want to remember this as the United States rides off into the Asian sunset. Tatanka, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just add that it was not just Iran and Iraq, it was North Korea, and they were all three demonized right after that. The event that you're talking about, Harvey, is a tipping point. It has been out in the open. It's been in play for decades and decades. And I mean, I learned, some people I've told the story here, I learned from somebody who was working at Stanford Research Institute almost 50 years ago, who was telling me that sometime around 2020, the United States will be at war with whoever the president of Russia is. And the whole goal was to isolate China, right? And after Russia had spun off its ethnic provinces to kind of push it into the European sphere. And so, I mean, if I knew that, I'm sure everybody's intelligence in the world knew it. And we've been watching this build slowly for decades and decades, what's now coming together as you describe it. So it's not a surprise. I doubt that it's a surprise for the CIA, but who knows? I mean, did they really, think that supporting Chiang Kai-shek and Mao was just a nobody? I mean, we could be repeating that part of history too.
Yes. So at any rate, we're going to leave that behind, and you're 100% right, Tatanka. This is I've been watching for the last week. My daughter is laid up with a bum leg, and we watched, and I highly recommend this for your educational, your understanding of what's happened to this country's economy, which really took the big dive, the big short, as it were, in 2008. We watched, first of all, we watched a 4-part series on Bernie Madoff, which is astounding that he could have done what he did. And then we watched a movie called The Big Short, which is an absolute masterpiece. I've actually seen it 5 times. You really need to watch this movie to understand what is happening to the American economy. The Big Short, Steve Carell is in it, Christian Bale. It's extremely well done. And he made off with everyone's retirement. And Bernie Madoff was just a sociopath. It's hard to believe he did what he did. And followed by a movie called Margin Call with Kevin Spacey. And then at the end, we watched sort of a docudrama. It wasn't very good, actually, in terms of quality, but it told the story of how Shearson Lehman went down the tubes. And these cinematic pieces really explained as a whole where the economy went in 2008. And Obama had the chance to come in and really restructure the banking system and move some resources to the people who had lost their homes and their jobs and their cars and their health insurance. And well, he did provide health insurance in part. And really a lot was explained in these movies that no one went to jail except one guy. They found one guy, an obscure number cruncher, to send to jail for the trillions of dollars that were lost in the 2008 crash. And really, if you have to see one movie to understand where we're at economically in this country, it would be The Big Short. And I strongly recommend it. We will not have a quiz next week, but please, everybody, pay attention, and pay attention now to what's happening in Ukraine and the maneuvering between the Chinese and the Russians, and very important to watch where India, Iran, Brazil, and other countries come down, big countries with big economic stakes in the global economy come down on this, because this is a turning point in American power, and it cannot be overstated. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for letting me go on about that. We want to get to the first item on the agenda, which is the most important race going on in the country now, and then Brim will get to you on LGBTQ issues and trans issues, and Florida with Wendy Liederman also. I want to talk about the Wisconsin race. It is coming on April 4th, a week from tomorrow, actually, is that correct? And I have been finally starting to get some email solicitations, and maybe some of you have, from the Democrats about this race. I've been getting solicitations from, as I mentioned last week, and I'm sure you are too, from candidates who are running next fall in Wisconsin. It's outrageous. And we have this incredibly important race going on right now in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Supreme Court was 4-3 for a dozen years, dominated by extreme right-wingers who put in, gerrymandering on the brink of banning abortion. And this is my piece on Counterpunch. Thank you, Steve, for putting it up there. And thank you, Counterpunch, for running it. This is the Wisconsin Supreme Court here. People generally don't pay attention to state Supreme Court races, but this one could actually decide the presidential election next year, because voting rights are absolutely at issue in front of this court. And if they prevent people of color again from voting in Wisconsin, Wisconsin went for Trump in 2016 and then for Biden in 2020, only because of grassroots organizing. Then we lost the Senate seat. The Democrats lost the Senate seat in 22. Mandela Barnes, a progressive African-American candidate, should never have lost to this horrific MAGA guy, Ron Johnson. But the Republicans bragged, and it's in my article. There's a direct quote, and we are an election protection focus here, a direct quote from a Republican operative in Milwaukee bragging about the thousands of people that he personally prevented from voting in Wisconsin. And that decided this critical US Senate race in Wisconsin, with this horrible MAGA Republican defeating this good progressive candidate, should never have happened. And simultaneously, the Democratic governor was reelected. So this, as we've talked about previously, this a Supreme Court race in Wisconsin is extremely important. The most important race of the year, could actually decide the presidential race next year. We are emphasizing the get out to vote aspect of this. The Center for Common Ground, which is centerforcommonground.org. If you go on that website, you're confronted with a screen, and they tell you how and to make direct calls into the state. And I did that in Georgia 2022. It was actually very interesting, a lot of fun. And people need to do it in the next week because people who have been canvassing there say that very, very few people know that this race is even happening. I mean, who pays attention to Supreme Court, state Supreme Court races? So the big important thing is to raise awareness. There are people who are going to be driving voters to the polls in Wisconsin, and that could make all the difference. It's expected to be a very close race. The woman who's running on the liberal side, officially a nonpartisan race, is called Judge Judy. I can't pronounce her last name. I keep wanting to call her Antetokounmpo, but she does not play center for the Milwaukee Bucks. So, I urge everyone, go to centerforcommonground.org and make the phone calls. If you can't do that, there's a group in Wisconsin called Souls to the Polls. And we had them on their website is soulstothepolls.wi.org. Steve, if you can, I think you can put that in the chat maybe. That's helpful as well. Does anyone want to say anything about this Supreme Court race in Wisconsin? Ruth Strauss, please. Ruth, unmute you here. I actually got.
Harvey, it's Judge Janet, not Judge Judy.
Oh, Judge Janet, yes. And does anyone want to say
her last name, I think maybe Polish or something like that. It's Proskowitz or something like that.
Yes,
it's a long Polish name. So thank you. And yes, Common Ground will make it very easy for you to do phone banking, and they have webinars to do it. And the other thing I wanted to add real quickly, Harvey, is there's also a movie that's hysterically funny, but extremely informative. And the Academy finally did something good. They gave it the Academy Award in 2010. It's called Inside Job. And it explains all that crazy stuff about credit default swaps and not only Lehman Brothers, but all the other banks that went down. So it's and started in Iceland. Anyway, it's very good also. But thanks for your movie reviews.
Yes, well, that one. And there's also one about Enron called Smartest Guys in the Room.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I got to say, anybody on this call, if you have not seen The Big Short, you need to see The Big Short. It is the best movie I've ever seen about Wall Street, and what happened, certainly about what happened in 2008. Extremely complicated stuff made very easy and actually enjoyable to understand. Dennis Bernstein and then Lynn. Dennis from KPFA, glad to have you on board. Unmuted.
I'm here. Let's see.
Yes, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So I just wanted to, that you left this like a cliffhanger. You were talking about the banks in the beginning, and you sort of got to the point where why didn't Obama do anything about it? Because he didn't do anything about it because the person who got him elected, Penny Pritzker, was a banking criminal from a family of criminals that go way back, offshore bank. Pritzker was Obama's finance chairwoman. And Pritzker, actually, just before she took that job, crashed a bank in Chicago, Superior Bank. She crashed it. It cost taxpayers almost $1 billion, and 1,400 people with savings accounts lost their money. Then she took a job working for Obama, and everybody wondered, how could Obama raise more than Clinton? How could he outdo the Clintons? Paul Penny Pritzker, who had, the banking bandits for decades. You want to know all about offshore storage of money and illegal operations? See the Pritzkers. Whatever is terrible about banking, the Pritzkers did it first and set the tone. That's why Barack Obama got elected president. I don't know. Right. Am I going on here? You get it though? This is everybody wondered what's going to happen. Here comes Penny. Don't worry, everything's safe. And all the go-go banking, she was in the middle of it. The Pritzkers set the tone, and it's unbelievable. It was never a story. Never a
Dennis,
story. Yeah.
Dennis, it sounds like she's penny wise and dollar foolish.
Yeah,
so is anybody who works with her.
Shut up. Exactly.
She's also very pro-nuclear, by the way. That family has supported the so-called nuclear renaissance with a ton of money. They're behind the Breakthrough Institute and that guy Scheisskopf. whatever his name is, who runs around.
I don't think that's his real name, but that might be a good epithet for him.
Dennis, thank you for that. If you want to see how a bank jumped out from under what you're describing, see Margin Call with Kevin Spacey. That shows you how a bank who knew they were had garbage assets dumped all their assets just ahead of the tsunami that wiped everybody out. We got 50 people with us. LYNN Heidikoper. Thank you, Dennis. LYNN Heidikoper.
One thing, Penny Pritzker I think she was CEO of Hyatt Hotels, wasn't she? And she is anti-labor. So I demonstrated outside a Hyatt hotel where she denied them unionization. She finally caved in, but only like the Boston Hyatt. Not every Hyatt was able to have labor. Anyway, the reason I'm calling is I put in the chat, I mistakenly put Judge Judy. Watched too much TV.
That's why I got it.
Too much TV. Saywood. I've been phone banking for her, and actually it looks pretty good. I've gotten a lot of people are going to vote for her.
Yes, they say the polls show her ahead. She's running against a total abomination. Another Ron Johnson MAGA guy. This guy's name, I believe, is Kelly. He was on the Supreme Court before. He's anti-choice, anti-democracy, the whole deal. And if the liberals get a hold, Dan Kelly, thank you, Carl. If the liberals get a hold of the Supreme Court, we may reverse gerrymandering. I mean, the numbers in the Wisconsin legislature are nauseating. Wisconsin is pretty well 50-50, maybe slightly more Democratic, and the Republicans have super majorities in both houses of the Wisconsin legislature, only because of gerrymandering. It's unreal. So please do pay attention to this. We have 1 week to go on this. I got an email today from Cory Booker. This is the first Democratic Party email I've gotten supporting the Supreme Court race. And Cory Booker, there is. I'm reading the name. I still don't dare pronounce it. Protasewicz. Maybe that's it. Protasewicz. If you can say Antetokounmpo, you can say Protasewicz. The email I got from Cory Booker asks to split the money. I've never seen this. He says back the Supreme Court race, and by the way, give me half the money that you're match the grant you're gonna give her with money from me. It's outrageous. Anyway, Jeffrey, very quickly, and this will be your one question for the time, and then we'll go forward. Jeffrey Barker, really quickly, please. One thing.
I wanted to comment on what Dennis Bernstein said.
Very good. Go ahead. What is it? Yes.
Did you know how FDR got elected? It was through the corporates.
Okay.
That's a little bit off topic, but thanks, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Okay,
but we are going to look at how people get elected and unelected, and how dark money and corporate money has been swamping primaries and even Democratic Party elections now in the states. And Sluggo, I just wanted to let you know Judith Whitmer is here.
Judith is here, and Bryn, I hope you can stay with us. We're going to talk about the Nevada Democratic Party unseating the progressives, and then we're going to go to Florida with the LGBTQ issues. Bryn, you'll be part of that discussion, and also the laundry list of what Ron DeSantis has in store for us. And I have a marketing idea. I think we should start marketing T-shirts, pink T-shirts with a triangle for Florida, and we can talk about that in a bit. Judith Whitmer, you've been on with us before. Whitmer, you've been on with us before. When you were on with us before, you were head of the Democratic Party of Nevada, and I understand that is no longer true. Can you tell us what happened in Nevada with you and the Democratic Party, please?
Sure, thanks. And thank you for having me on today. Basically, my stand against dark money in Democratic primaries made me a target for establishment for corporatist DEMS as well. I introduced that resolution twice to the DNC. The first time they refused to take a vote, and the second time they refused to nobody stepped forward to actually present a motion to take a vote. So effectively, it was blocked twice by the DNC Resolutions Committee. And it's part of the whole system as far as the corruption goes, and as far as how toxic the political system has become at the DNC, where, you know, it's stacked, the membership is stacked with lobbyists and corporate consultants that basically run all of these committees and decide what gets through and what doesn't get through. But regardless of that, we had a successful election here in Nevada. 2022 was a good year for Nevadans. We reelected Senator Cortez Masto. We effectively held the Senate for U.S. Congress. We held the Senate. And we elected a majority of our state legislature. So we had a really good election, really good year, and the Democratic Party was extremely successful. Our administration did a lot of new things, a lot of great things, including reelecting all those people. And we had a great fundraising year. We had to do all of our own fundraising because the DNC, the DS, and the D-TRIP gave all of the funding to our competing organization, which was Nevada Democratic Victory, which, as some of you may recall, was a shadow organization that set up shop shortly after my election as the chair of the Democratic Party of Nevada. They set up shop as a separate organization to run the coordinated campaign for Senator Cortez Masto. But it was still up to our Democratic Party to elect all of our Democrats up and down the ballot. And we did a great job of that. We had successful turnout. We increased rural turnout. We worked with our rural county parties and coalition to turn out the vote across Nevada, not just in Clark and Washoe counties, but across the state of Nevada, which has been unheard of in previous years. So we implemented a lot of new outreach programs. We implemented a lot of support for our down ballot races because, as most of you know, extremist agendas start at the down ballot level. They start in, in state legislative houses. They start in judicial seats and state offices, and they bubble up from there to the Supreme Court. So we felt that it was our responsibility to take a hard look at how we could help down ballot races as well. And we did that successfully. We had some really significant wins in our judicial races, as well as our state legislative races, and numerous other races like school board races that are also important in our communities, because those down ballot races have an enormous impact on our daily lives. So we took those things very seriously. We enacted programs, outreach programs, down ballot campaigns. We enacted legislative initiatives. We did legislative roundtables to involve the community and keep them participating in non-election years. And we had a lot of great successes. Unfortunately, that's not really what the Democratic Party wants. They may say so. Chair Harrison over and over again would lecture us during DNC meetings about how important down ballot races are. But when the reality is that they really do not care about state races or down ballot races. They want to hoard all the money and control all of the races at the top levels. And it's really all about the top of the ticket. And also in the past, one of the things that we had promised was that we would level the playing field for progressive candidates and for candidates of color and for our rural down ballot candidates. And we did that successfully as well. And that's another thing that the corporatists did not like and the consulting class did not like, because it made it impossible for them to control those elections. Just like you're seeing as far as dark money and in these primary races where the candidate that should win isn't winning because of all this dark money. This is what it's about. It's about control. They want the candidates that support the status quo and that support the consulting class to win. And so when it came time for the state party elections, they actually used a PAC against us. This is how absurd it is, because my office is volunteer. Like the Democratic State Party Chair of Nevada is a volunteer office. I did not get paid for all the work that I did and all the energy and time and effort I put into that job and all the travel I put into it. It ultimately is not what they are looking for. It's not what they want. They don't want to expand the Democratic Party. They don't want everyone to have the chance to participate. They do not want everyone's voice to be heard. It's only the people they want to hear from that they want to be part of the process. It's only the people that will fall in line and take orders and not ask questions that they want to be part of the process. And they want to control every single election, even at the primary level, because they don't want progressives to win office. They absolutely do not want progressives to be represented at the upper levels. And they want to control all the money. And by taking over the state party again, that gives them the opportunity to funnel millions in dark money through the state party to these consultants and to the campaigns of the top of the ticket. So regardless of the fact that they had tons of money, we didn't interfere with any of that. They were still able to run their coordinated campaigns separate from the state party. They were still able to get all the funding and everything else. And despite the fact that we reelected Senator Cortez Masto and reelected our entire state legislature, they still decided that we were too much of an obstruction for what they ultimately saw as their goal, which was to absolutely control every single facet of the state party, all the money. And, by doing that, then the same consultants have control, the same consultants add to their funds, the same consultants make millions and millions of dollars off of every campaign. And nobody from the community or from grassroots organizing is going to have an opportunity to win these races as long as they have that kind of control, because they have unlimited dark money. They have no remorse in using that dark money against primary candidates in the Democratic primary. So it's one of those battles that we're going to have to keep fighting. The fact that they used the Sapphire PAC to run a campaign against me and my slate should tell you all that you need to know. That Sapphire PAC takes donations from Pfizer, from Southwest Gas, from Nevada Energy. And that same Sapphire PAC was established by my opponent, Assemblywoman Danielle Monroe Marino. And that PAC also donated to all of the state legislators there in the Nevada state legislature. So, they're maintaining absolute control by putting one of their own again at the top. And the consultants have regained control of the state party, and all the work that we did to build a permanent infrastructure to run effective down ballot statewide campaigns, our outreach programs, all of that has already been demolished, dismantled. They dismantled our whole infrastructure. We had a successful year-round operating infrastructure with permanent staff. They laid off our entire unionized staff because they're trying to avoid having unionized staff. They don't want to pay union dues or union wages. So they've effectively completely demolished everything that we built over the past 2 years, and that is absolutely just for the goal and enrichment of our consultants.
Judith, our sympathies are with you. This must be really hard for you. We loved having you back before, and we know I read something similar. I don't know if there's anybody on from New York, but I think a similar purge went on in New York, and of course the New York Democratic Party completely blew control of Congress this time, and and this is what's going on in Wisconsin as well. There was a Supreme Court race in Wisconsin a few years ago where the Democrats just, blew the whole thing off. And so I fear for the future when the real people are purged from the party. It's a nightmare. So we're with you, and what you've just said is incredibly important, and it's at the root. This is why we're a nonpartisan group. This is at the root of the kind of campaigning we push, and one of the great gurus in this is John Steiner. John, did you want to speak to this? And also, I just want to take this moment to point out later this evening, there's a major Zoom with Our Revolution. They're going to be talking about issues like this. And John, you also have another Zoom coming up. You may want to tell people about that as well. So John Steiner, please.
Judith, I just wanted to add kind of real commiseration and sadness, much less anger and rage, to what you've just shared with us, which we know is going on all over the country, and the Democrat Party challenging any progressive running in a primary at the same time. So my question is,
what do you do next? Other than kind of spreading the word and speaking truth to power.
Well, I will continue speaking truth to power, but I also am looking at several other options, continuing to do grassroots organizing as always, and we'll continue to fight the dark money, especially in our Democratic primaries. I mean, that's some place where we should really take a stand, because the Democratic Party platform even calls for that, but they refuse to actually pass anything to enact it or enforce it or have consequences for any of those who don't abide by those rules. So it's really just paying lip service. And I think that the Democrats have got to prove that we're willing to do more than lip service. And that's why nonpartisan numbers are growing. I mean, we're seeing tremendous growth in nonpartisan registration, but yet the Democratic Party keeps looking the other way, like, oh, you know, they're just a bunch of extremists, they don't count. They're still trying to play to that moderate Republican that doesn't really exist anymore. But I think that they're going to have a rude awakening coming in the next coming years as more and more nonpartisans realize that they do have power, and they start to vote as blocks, and they start to organize among themselves the way, you know, grassroots organizers have. I think that we'll start to see some more of that too, because just because you're nonpartisan doesn't mean you're not interested in who's running for office, or that you don't have somebody that you would like to see run for office, or that you would support if they were running for office. So there's a lot of energy out there yet to harness.
And Judith, are you connecting with other folks like you who have been similarly exiled, as it were? Harvey mentions New York. We know part of what's going on in Florida. Is there an emerging national network of those of you who have been leaders on the progressive side to kind of amplify your efforts and make them better known?
Yes, there is that conversation going on. There is that communication, and we're going to be expanding on that in the next coming weeks. There are definitely there's a lot of opportunity there.
Keep us posted.
There needs to be a national. Go ahead, John.
Keep us posted. Thank you.
Thank
John,
you.
what is your Zoom coming up later in the week? You have a Zoom call that you.
We can pass on that one now. It's
okay. So I think there needs to be of course, a national organization of people like you who have run state parties. We had these issues, especially as I mentioned, 3 U.S. Senate seats definitely turned on the Democrats' unwillingness to do grassroots organizing, which was in Ohio, where they could have won if with a relatively progressive candidate, pro-nuclear. But what can I tell you? In North Carolina, where Beasley should have won, absolutely, and in Wisconsin, where Mandela Barnes should have won, absolutely, losing by I think 30,000 votes. Thankfully, you were in place, and you weren't expected. The Senate was not expected to be held, and that seat was held, and probably because of your efforts. And then, of course, they got rid of you. So here we are. This is endemic. It's also in Florida, of course, where they've just put in basically, you know, sometimes I think that the Democratic Party is actually being run by Steve Bannon. And, you know, that they do what they really need to do to lose. And we're seeing that all over the place. Myla Reeson, you had the firsthand.
Thank you. And let's not forget about what happened to Nina Turner in Ohio.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Judith, I am wondering whether you have a website or an organization or someplace where people can learn about what happened in Nevada and offer some kind of monetary support or help you get the word out. Do you have a website?
We are actually working on that. And I will have something soon that I can share with everybody.
Well, I think you might consider working with John, because John's in contact with other groups around the country, and to set up exactly such a website, you know, Democrats, progressive Democrats in exile, or something like that. And this is what we transcended in Georgia in 2020 and 22. If the progressives through and the grassroots campaigners through the Center for Common Ground and the Atlanta and now Georgia NAACP had not gotten around the Democratic Party, those 2 seats definitely would not have been won. And that's what we're looking at the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. And I think that's why I was actually shocked to get this email from Cory Booker, the very mainstream senator from New Jersey, offering to share a donation with the Supreme Court candidate in Wisconsin. To me, this is the mainstream piggybacking on the grassroots, and that phenomenon I'm sure you are very, very well aware of. So this should be written up. There should be a website about this going into 24. That's what we're about, and we hope you'll stick with us and join us in the future as we move ahead here. Okay, we have
Sluggo, I have a quick question for Judith as well. Judith, you've advocated for an energized grassroots approach to state Democratic Party leadership, and you proved that such an approach is far more successful than other approaches which have failed catastrophically in other states like Florida and earlier in Virginia. What lessons can we learn and apply based on these totally different types of organizing? Your way of doing it, and also, as Sluggo referenced, the Georgia way of using grassroots, year-round engagement versus mainly TV ads and, trying to get people to vote, a few weeks before the election. What lessons can we learn and apply?
Great question. I think the main lessons we can learn is that there's not one approach fits all, first of all. It's going to have to take a lot of strategic effort on the parts of grassroots organizations to look at these things individually to determine where we can make the best approach or how we can make the best approach. Because one state is not going to be the same as any other state. Not only the landscape going to look different, but the demographics are different across different states. The political system in place is different. I mean, the Florida Democratic Party looks a lot different than the Nevada Democratic Party. So we have to look at where we can approach those things and how we can approach those things. And it's going to take several different strategies going forward to have any success. I've had several conversations with Florida progressives. They're near and dear to my heart because I'm originally from the Florida area. So I grew up in Florida. So I think that we can't say one strategy fits all. We have to look at different strategies. I still feel strongly that there has to be inside and outside work done. It's not going to be all on the outside or all on the inside. We're going to have to be pulling and pushing at the same time to get any real measure of success. Progressives are in for a long battle. It's not going to be anything short term. And I think we also have to get better at looking at the long game, the big picture, and how some of these small steps fit into the big picture, because we always want to see immediate successes, immediate strategic results. But we have to see how that looks at the long game and what we're really working for in the long game. I mean, is our long game a progressive presidential candidate, a progressive successful presidential candidate? Do we want a real progressive in the White House? Is that our big strategy? Or is our big strategy going to be looking at individual states and seeing where we can make those big wins within those states to set us up for a win in 2028? Because it's not going to be 2024. We have to look at our 2028 strategy going forward and how we're going to have all that infrastructure in place ahead of 2028. Because it really is going to take an absolute infrastructure, a progressive infrastructure across the nation to have that kind of success going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. This needs to be written up. It needs to be explained very clearly. This is what our 131st call on basically just this topic. This is what we're about: protecting the vote and switching the progressive resources to the grassroots. And your experience is certainly exemplary of what can happen here when the mainstream Democrats come crashing down on the grassroots, as of course we learned in the two primaries that Bernie ran in. So this is critical. Very good. Thank you for that, Justin, Wendy, and Eric. Justin LeBlanc, please. And we're going to push through this. Usually we stop with the politics at the and go to the environment at 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock Pacific. But I think we got enough. We're going to put. I hope, Bryn, you can stay with us. We got enough to power through here into Florida, where we have had a similar fight for control of the Democratic Party, and again, the progressives have gotten crushed, and we wound up now with the most terrifying politician I've seen in my entire lifetime, Ron DeSantis. So this is what happens when the mainstream Democrats get rid of the grassroots. Justin, please, then Wendy and Eric.
Sure. If any of you guys have worked for a corporate employer, you probably understand this corporate culture idea of the harder you work, the more they make you work. Judith, I think you're a prime example of that. In fact, you're in some ways a victim of your own success because the party sees that and wants to co-opt that rather than support that. And so it's clear that it's not just doing a good job. What's necessary here is also leverage against the party itself. And my favorite statement right now is the solution to tyranny is plurality. And what does that basically mean? It means instead of being in, like, say, waiting for 100 layers of bureaucracy to get to your specialist doctor, going to an association of doctors where you have 100 specialists right there in the room. So the idea of a multi-member district is the same kind of thing, where instead of having one representative, you have 5 representatives, like a city council. We should be extending that to statewide races, not just cities and counties. And that is something that the citizens can push themselves. We want more representation rather than less. And we're not just going to accept the one champion that you corporate office want to put out, because again, they're all about consolidating, monopolizing. We want distribution, kind of like we want distributed energy, right? Okay, so that's my soapbox. But thank you, Justin, very much for your
I want to pose this reality. The Democratic Party had a choice in 2016 between Bernie and Trump. And they definitely preferred Trump. I mean, the mainstream Democratic Party, when confronted with a serious progressive who could have won, preferred. Julie Weiner has joined us good because she'll have a report from the Democratic Party fiasco in New York as well. And the same thing in Wisconsin, when confronted with an African American progressive like Mandela Barnes, they chose Ron Johnson. And I fear what's going to happen in the race. You have Jackie Rosen, is that who it is? I think I met her actually, the senator, and she's going to have an uphill race, and she's not going to have a grassroots Democratic Party to run with, and that's very serious.
You have to realize that they don't think that they need one. Right. They're very arrogant about that, and the Democratic Party here, and I know everybody's familiar with the term the Reid machine. Well, Senator Harry Reid was an amazing person, but he's not running the machine. It's the consultants running the machine. He's, not only that he's no longer with us, he hasn't run the machine in a while. The machine's has been run by consultants. And those consultants pay out a lot of money to bring people into the state to run these campaigns. So there effectively isn't really any grassroots organizing or campaigning within the Democratic Party here anymore. It's all being done professionally. They're paying people from outside, bringing them in. They always talk about, they've got all this union support, but they really don't. What they do is they pay the culinary union on a national basis. They have a contract with the culinary union. The culinary union gives time off to their employees to come to Nevada, and they get double paid. They get paid for their job, and they get paid by the coordinated campaign to do canvassing and stuff. They always pretend that they're volunteers or they're grassroots organizers, and they're not. They're paid to do these jobs. So they have these kind of deep roots and these deep pockets with all this dark money to bring people in. They don't really care about grassroots organizing anymore. They haven't for a long time.
Right. They fear grassroots organizing.
Yes, they do.
As a matter of fact, they oppose grassroots organizing. So that's what we're about here at these GREEP calls. I want to say, my listeners at Progressive Radio Network, prn.live, this is about the end of our hour. With this, obviously, this conversation is going to continue. You can hear that it's being recorded. You can hear the rest of it. at grassrootsep.org or electionprotection2024.org. We are recording, and it is posted there online, the whole Megillah. So if you're signing off from PRN right now on our Thursday hour, and you want to hear the rest of it, join us at electionprotection2024.org. Wendy, and then Eric. And Julie Weiner, I want to invite you, I welcome you. We're talking about how the Nevada Democratic Party purged its progressive leadership. And the same thing, I believe, has just happened in New York. Eric, Wendy, and then Eric.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us, Judith. Thanks for being back with us. We enjoyed having you both times. Just a couple of quick points. And so one, I think it's kind of amazing that what Hillary was busted for with Bernie, like undermining completely, is what's the common culture now. I'm here in Florida as well. I didn't know you were from here. That's great. I volunteered with the DNC. You had to volunteer through the DNC if you wanted to oversee or help with the curing and the recount in the DeSantis race when he ran against Gillum and Rick Scott was elected. And I watched the DNC like fumble it so poorly that, I mean, it was just, there was no recount, there was no curing. It was I lost all faith in it. What I wanted to say is we have a mutual friend in Carolina Impudia who just yeah, she wanted to be with us today. She's become kind of a regular, but we go back a few years. We're really good friends. I'm from Broward. So I guess it's like speaking for her, just maybe get in contact with her because, you know, what just happened, she just ran for the Dem chair after stepping down as the progressive head, and she does a phenomenal job, but she's been doing a lot of organizing, and it would be great to have us kind of, you know, like what John STEINER mentioned, but to get that, you know, to, like, because now, like in Florida, I'm seeing all the Democrats, like they're just getting behind Nikki Fried, who as well, like when she ran for governor, she attacked Charlie Crist more than she did DeSantis. Yeah. And people think that they can trust her. And we need to have a viable alternative, a strong foundation and something progressive, like you're saying with the nonpartisan or the independent voters. I think they care more than, I don't want to say more than, but possibly more than regular people, because they're the ones paying attention. Like they're independent because they actually care about the issues and aren't just going to play, you know, ego team in their side. So anyway, reach out to Carolina or and maybe we can all continue this fight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wendy. We're going to carry on with a discussion in Florida. Eric Lazarus, you're in New York, and Julie Weiner. I believe I read somewhere that after completely blowing the congressional elections in New York, the Democratic Party has proceeded to purge the progressives there. Maybe I'm wrong. Eric Lazarus, do you have a comment on that? You're also in New York.
Hey, I feel a little embarrassed. I feel like I should have a really good answer to this question myself, but I don't. Judy, under what circumstances would you recommend to people in a position like the one you were in to run a parallel progressive Democratic organization, club, whatever the right term is, and to do a lot of get out the vote, voter registration, funding and stuff in an organization that's harder for corporate Democrats to take over because it's the board of directors of it would be all progressive people. Does that make any sense? Under what circumstances would it? I'm Eric. Thanks so much.
Well, Eric, that makes absolute sense. It's funny that you mentioned that because that's one of the things that we've been talking about a lot here in Nevada is running like an umbrella campaign team, like an umbrella campaign team where we build our own infrastructure for our down ballot candidates that are progressive and run it in parallel to the Democratic Party because we know the Democratic Party will not support those candidates. And they're going to do everything they can to make sure that progressives or that even candidates that come from the grassroots that are coming organically from their communities that want to represent their communities, especially like the Black and Hispanic communities here or the AAPI communities here that want to really truly represent their communities, but they're not given that opportunity because they can't afford to pay the Democratic Party $100,000 for van access or you know access to the voter files. And what we did as a state party was we did away with that. We gave them in-kind van services for, you know, and just report it as an in-kind donation to their campaigns. We made sure that every single down ballot candidate had access to the tools and resources they needed. So we're going to have to continue that in some way, or find a way to continue that work so that those candidates can be successful and have a platform to run on. And that's going to require that we build our own infrastructure. But the good news is that we have experience building that infrastructure now through the Democratic Party. We know what they're going to do, how they're going to obstruct us. We know everything we need to know about compliance reporting and all of those things that go into running those operations. So we can successfully run a parallel organization. And I think that we will be looking at that quite seriously.
So I think what you might consider, Judith, is to look at the book that was compiled on the Georgia Miracle and be in touch with Andrea and Ray McClendon. And maybe we can come up with a blended guidebook going forward for the 24 election, so that nobody is blindsided after all these years by the corporate Democrats, and we can get around them and elect some decent people, and not wind up with Ron Johnson, for God's sakes, as the senator from Wisconsin. I mean, I can barely, and this idiot from Ohio, J.D. Vance. There's no reason. John and I talked to the people from Ryan's campaign and tried to get them to do grassroots organizing, and nothing. John, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing, Judith and Harvey. I don't know if you guys saw this, and I think he's an ally with us on this, but I'm not quite sure how, namely Michael Moore.
Yeah.
Michael did a 12-part short series over the Christmas holidays he called Blue Dots in a Red Sea. And he really called on his people to essentially do this parallel kind of organizing. And I don't know what's on his website, Harvey. I don't know if you can get him on, but he basically is saying much the same thing and giving ordinary citizens a toolbook on how to organize.
Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got what we needed when the sun shone down on the Garden of Eden.